Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is locate. Let's take a moment to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this particular verb. The first way you might hear locate used is to mean to discover the exact place or position of someone or something. We're going to see lots of example sentences with this later. I think this is probably the most common way you might hear this verb used. A second way locate used is to mean to situate in a particular place. So here we might think about setting or putting something in a particular place. A third way the verb locate gets used is to mean to establish oneself or one's business in a particular or specific place. You should know that the verb locate is a regular verb. We have a verb that ends with a vowel, a consonant, and an E. So when I go to make my progressive form of this verb, I'm going to drop the E and then add ing to form locating. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in a E. Now our base verb, locate, ends in a T sound. This means that the ed ending is going to make an id sound when we say it. So it should sound like this. Located, located. Okay. Now, you might be happy or a bit relieved to know there aren't any additional phrasal verbs that we need to study. So instead, we're going to focus on making some example sentences with our verb locate. And I want you first to know that anytime I think about verbs, I think about how do people really use these. And so I search out newspaper articles, I watch videos for real examples. And one thing I noticed as I listened and observed some different examples of locate was how frequently it was used in the passive voice. So I thought it might be good to look at some examples and talk a little bit about passive voice. If you're a regular watcher of my videos, you'll know most of my examples are in the active voice. That is more common to hear, but you will see examples of passive voice when you're reading. You might also hear it in certain environments and circumstances. So if this phrase passive voice is new for you, what it means is that our sentence is beginning with the object, the thing that receives the action. And many times with the passive voice, we don't know who is responsible for doing the action, and that's okay. Sometimes we don't, which is one reason many people use the passive voice. So today we're going to look at some sentences in the passive voice that are in the simple past tense. And you might remember we use the simple past tense to talk about completed actions, particularly when we know the time at which something was completed. You might hear this referred to as the definite past. So to make passive voice sentences, again, I start with my object, the thing that receives the action. And then what I'm going to use is a past form of be. So with the past tense, right, this is going to be was or were. We use was with I, he, she, and it. We use were with you, we, and they. Okay? After that past form of be, what you're going to notice is the participle form of the verb. And here, locate is a regular verb, so you're going to use that ed form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence here. The vehicles were located 4 miles from where they were stolen. Okay. I actually have 2 passive voice verbs in this sentence. So we don't know who sort of found or discovered these vehicles at a particular place. We also don't know who was responsible for the action of stealing. And that's okay. Many times, I think you will see this simple past tense, passive voice usage with locate as it relates to reporting on crime. And so I'm sorry that has kind of a negative or maybe a slightly uncomfortable feeling for some of us as we read these examples, but again, real examples here. Let's take a look at making a negative sentence in the simple past tense. Again, we always start with our objects. We use the past form of be, then not, and then our participle. Here you might notice contractions wasn't or weren't used. I've used a contraction in my example sentence. The firearm wasn't located. Right? So we don't know who was looking for it. Firearm is another way to say gun as well, but we don't know who was responsible for discovering the place or the location of this particular item, but it was not discovered. And finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the passive voice in the past tense. To do this, I start with was or were, then I'm going to use my object, right, the thing that received the action, then the participle form of the verb. Here's my last past tense example. Was the phone eventually located? Okay. So again, that's that idea of discovering the place of something. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future. Again, we're going to focus on making passive voice sentences. So again, now we're talking about future activity, and we're going to be, again, starting with our object. What's going to change for the future here is we'll be using will be and then the participle form of the verb. We're going to do that with our affirmative or positive sentences. An example of this might be, the new restaurant will be located on the east side of town. So that goes back to that third definition of establishing a business, creating here a new restaurant at a specific place. If you want to make a negative simple future sentence in the passive voice, again, you start with your object, you use will not be, and then the participle form of the verb. You're going to notice the contraction for will not. That's won't in my example sentence here. The new prison won't be located near the elementary school. Okay. And finally, if I want to ask a yes or no question in the simple future, but do it in the passive voice, I start with will, then I have that object, and then be, and our participle form of the verb. You can see this in my example. Will the document be located in time? So here, that's sort of that discovered. We might think of the verb find here in this particular example. Now, let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb locate. And the first word we're going to discuss today is the noun location. This noun can be used in a couple different ways. We're going to talk about two. One way to use the noun location is to refer to a particular place or position. An example of this might be, the new park is in a central location. So this is suggesting to me it must be kind of in a center of town, maybe near many homes, something like that. It's not going to require a lot of people to drive a long way to get to the park. Another way the noun location gets used is to refer to the actual place or maybe a natural setting. And this could be used when we're talking about a movie, right? So here we're not talking about like being in a studio, having a set that pretends to look like something, but we're actually in the spot. Or sometimes it gets used with newscasts when we have reporters at the actual place that is being discussed or that is being reported on. So something you might hear someone say in a newscast would be is, our reporter is on location, right? They are really there. They're not in the studio or they're not at some other place reporting on this matter. Another word you might encounter is the noun locator. This is many times a device or some type of system for locating, for discovering something. An example of how you might hear this used or see it, perhaps, is Visit our website for our store locator to find a store near you. So many national companies, national brands might use sentences like this in their advertising. So if you go to their website, there might be a little button or area where you could type your zip code or your city or state to find, right, to discover the place that is nearest you. So that all connects there to our initial meaning for the verb. The last word we're going to discuss today is another verb, and that verb is to co-locate. So here I've added the prefix co, and many times when you see that used at the beginning of root words, it's going to mean together. And so here to co-locate means to have two or more things situated together or based at the same place. An example of how you might hear this used: the two fast food restaurants will be co-located near the newest gas station. Okay. So again, we've got another passive voice sentence there. Maybe you've seen this. There are many companies that decide to kind of jointly have or share a particular space. So here we're saying both of these restaurants, and I'm not going to use any examples. I don't want to give any free advertising to anyone, but they're going to be in the same building or at the same location, the same place. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.